He drew a distinct line of demarcation between Judaism and Christianity, claiming that Jesus had taught a universal doctrine which could not be confined within the narrow limits of Judaism. He declared that the mission of Jesus was to abrogate the Jewish concept of God, which was as opposed to the God and Father of Jesus, as matter is to spirit, as impurity is to purity. Marcion, it says, brought Jehovah before the tribunal of justice and questioned, how can a God break his own commandments? How could he consistently prohibit idolatry and image worship and still cause Moses to set up the brazen serpent? Have command, thou shalt not steal, and then order the Israelites to despoil the Egyptians of their gold and silver. Was Marcion wrong? In what respect does the jealous, wrathful, revengeful God of Israel resemble the God of Jesus? Did Jesus ever mention the name of Jehovah? From that memorable day when Jesus preached his Sermon on the Mount, an immeasurable chasm opened up between the God of that mount and the God of Mount Sinai. The language of Jesus is unequivocal. It implies not only rebellion against the Mosaic law, but an actual defiance of it. Quotation, ye have heard, he says, that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him to the other also. And again, ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you. Who then was the real Christian, Tertullian or Marcion? Tertullian's deity was the God of wrath and vengeance, who condemned the whole non-Christian world to eternal damnation. Marcion's God was a universal and impersonal principle. Tertullian's God showed neither mercy nor justice to his creation. Marcion taught the law of karma, in which effect follows cause as night follows days. Marcion was a brave man. He recognized the necessity of promulgating theosophical principles. He saw how those principles were being perverted by the Orthodox Church, and charged the Church Fathers with framing their doctrines according to the capacity of their hearers, favoring blind things for the blind according to their blindness, for the dull according to their dullness, for those in error according to their errors. Then those of us who study these doctrines today will have to make our own decisions and defend these pure souls who had the courage to stand up to the Orthodox Church at that time. But Tertullian and his views were upheld by the Orthodox Church, and it was owing to his refutation that Marcion, who was a bishop and the son of a bishop, was finally excommunicated and all of his works destroyed. Now, the third father, Valentinus or Valentinus, is called in the secret doctrine the profoundest doctor of Gnosis. He was educated in Alexandria in all that Egypt and Greece had to offer. His unusual learning and eloquence are admitted even by his bitterest enemies, and no word has ever been uttered against his moral character. While Valentinus was living in Alexandria, he came in contact with those communities which have already been described, the Therapeutae and Ophites. From them he learned the Gnosis, the original source from which all true systems of religion and philosophy have sprung. Realizing that the true systems of the various Gnostic schools were presenting but in other words, different aspects of the Gnosis, Valentinus resolved to synthesize these different aspects, and from this synthesis to formulate a universal system, which would include them all, even Christianity. But the exclusive policy of the Orthodox Church was definitely opposed to anything which denied the uniqueness of the Christian religion. And so Valentinus, like Basilides and Marcion, was excommunicated and all of his works destroyed. Another heretic was removed from the ranks of Christianity, and another Dertonology closed. Again, the work of the Theosophical movement was frustrated by those who failed to realize its importance. Now, against these three Gnostic fathers, the heretics, we will now discuss the Orthodox Church fathers, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Tertullian. Justin was one of the earliest church fathers after the apostolic age, and was born of Greek parents around the year 105. Before entering the church, he had attempted to get into the Pythagorean school because he wanted to study the Gnosis, but because he had no knowledge of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, he was denied entrance to that school. In the year 135, Justin entered the church and became, according to Catholic history, quote, a most valuable witness to the faith and a philosophical, if not logical, defender of Christianity. Justin declared that the miracles of Jesus and Apollonius were identical. He admitted that Jesus' miracles were matters of tradition alone, while those of Apollonius were matters of common knowledge, because he was conducting them in front of their eyes. His lack of logic appears when, after admitting the Gnostic teaching that all religions had sprung from a common source, he still insisted that Christianity was unique. Justin Martyr, though, was a bold man and flung his gauntlet in the face of the Orthodox Church fathers whenever he disagreed with them. When Tertullian declared that all pagan philosophers were burning in hell, Justin Martyr took offense at this and stood up for the philosophers whom he said were burning in hell. But he still came down history as a saint, and his reputations against the heresies are considered very valuable addition to the literature of the early church. Irenaeus, who later became the bishop of Lyons, was born in Asia. Now, Asia at that time, we had a map up here. It showed the eastern part of Turkey. That's where Asia was in the Roman Empire. That half of Turkey was considered Asia. The other half belonged to Syria at that time, or the Syrian expansion. He was born 135, was a pupil of Papias, bishop of Hierapolis, and through this association he also became acquainted with the original Gospel of Matthew, which had the esoteric writings of Jesus Christ. But unlike Basilides, Irenaeus refused to accept these teachings, and in the year 181 he published his 5 volumes of refutations against the heresies, which are considered to be a most valuable relic of early patristic literature that has come down to us. It is to Irenaeus that the church owes its doctrine of apostolic succession, because even though he was preceded by Justin Martyr, who never mentions Peter as associated with the Church of Rome, Irenaeus does. And he actually puts this forward audaciously, but does not offer any proof for it. So we owe the apostolic succession to Irenaeus, who created it himself. But the Gnostics had the better of him in one point. Through inconsistency, he could not understand the Kabbalistic doctrine of atonement, so Irenaeus presented this to the world in what? As vicarious atonement, and the writings say that if Peter had been alive at that time, he would have been horrified with it. While the Church is indebted to Irenaeus for its doctrine of vicarious atonement and its dogma of apostolic succession, it was Tertullian who first introduced the idea of eternal damnation and the custom of anathema into the Church. These two ideas are entirely original with the Christians. The pagans rejected both with horror, but the early Christian Church, under the influence of Tertullian, delivered over to eternal torture the greater portion of mankind. Tertullian affirmed that all persons who had been born before Jesus, or who persisted in their pagan beliefs after hearing of Christianity, could expect no forgiveness from the enraged deity. Tertullian was the son of a Roman centurion and was born in Carthage around the year 150. 40 years later he became a Christian priest. Just why he became one is not very easily understood, if at all understood. His adoption of the Christian faith was certainly not dictated by his reason, because this was what he wrote himself. Quotation, "I maintain that the Son of God was born. Why am I not ashamed of maintaining such a thing? Why? Because it itself is a shameful thing. I maintain that the Son of God died. I maintain that after being buried, he rose again, and that I take this to be absolutely true, because it was manifestly impossible." So intellectually he understands that what he's saying is wrong, but nevertheless he's saying it anyway. After becoming a priest of the religion which he had already defined as monstrously absurd, he devoted the rest of his life to the abuse of everybody and everything that did not agree with his personal viewpoint. His writings start with "against the Jews, against the Christians, against the Hermogenes," in which he declares that matter is not eternal but was created by God, against the Valentinians, against Marcion, against Paraxius, and so on. Tertullian's works are written in a very rude Punic Latin, interspersed with African or Old Latin idioms and phrases of Latinized Greek, the most important of his writing being his apologies of the Christians against the accusation of the Gentiles. In this work, Tertullian clearly states that Christianity is founded upon the Jewish Bible, which he claims to be the most ancient book in the world. The books of Moses, in which God has enclosed, as in a treasure, all the religion of the Jews and consequently of the Christians, reach far beyond the oldest books that you have. Tertullian's claim that Christianity is founded upon the Old Testament is still accepted by the Catholic Church. In 1870, Pope Pius IX wrote, quotation, "The Holy Mother Church affirms that it has pleased God to reveal himself and the eternal decrees of his will in a supernatural way. This supernatural revelation, as decreed by the Holy Council of Trent, is contained in the books of the Old and New Testament. These are sacred because they were written under the inspiration of the Holy Ghost. They have God for their author, and as such have been delivered to the Church."